we're live.
Cool, and welcome everyone to our April Scottish Developers Meetup. We've got a great lineup for you this evening, so without further ado, we'll get on to the contents of that. So first up, we've got Craig Nichol talking about the history and justification for proof key code exchange authorization flow. And then we'll have Christos Matskas on getting started with Microsoft Identity for developers. And then to just round up the evening, we'll have Carol talking about what's next for us. Before we continue into the main event, Carol, anything from you?
Yeah, just hello and thanks for joining us again. We've got lots of really good feedback from the last meetup, so that's really great. And you can, on YouTube, you'll see that there's a chat window. There's a few people saying hello, hi. You can pop in any questions that you've got for us or any comments or feedback, and for our speakers as well. And we know that they'll be keeping an eye on that during their talks. And you can always catch us on Twitter at Scottish Devs, and if you use hashtag Scottish Developers, we'll find your tweets and say hello there as well. And there is the usual. There's also LinkedIn and Facebook groups, but not going to lie, we keep an eye on Twitter. It's a lot easier to keep an eye on.
Well, without further ado, then we probably better go to the main event and say hello to our first speaker of the evening, who is Craig Nichol. So Craig will be giving us a talk on roughly proof key code exchange. So I won't butcher what you're about to say. I'll let you introduce yourself and your talk.
Thank you. Great. I'll share the screen. On T6. I've done this before, so that one. Right. Can you guys see that now? Hope so.
Yeah. All good. You can see your screen now.
Okay, great. So I'm going to be talking about the as Andrew said, PKCE. So basically, the whole idea here is how to authenticate to your app and to how to authenticate your app to the API without using any secrets, and why we actually want to do that sort of thing. And throughout this talk, there's going to be quite a few sequence diagrams. If you guys haven't seen them before, don't worry, I'll talk through as we go through them. So the key requirement we're going to be talking about today is you also want to log into your website, and then once you're logged in, securely call your APIs so that the users can transfer their data securely. We know who the user is. Make sure that only the user can see their own data. Obviously, it's a problem that we've seen in plenty of apps, plenty of websites. But the way we do it obviously changes as we learn more about how hackers work, and as new technologies come along. These slides will be available online, so you see the comments down there as well. So the old simple way of doing this that I'm sure anyone building a website from the 90s will be familiar with. You log into the website. The website says, "Hey, here's a web page. Fill that stuff in. Send the username and password." Now just give me I'm just going to check this. You see this drawing here? I'm not sure. But basically, so you log in with the username and password. That will create a session on the server, usually saved as a cookie. And then that session is live, so that as you're doing the communication, the web server knows who you are, and then the backend trusts that web server and does all the communication to say, "I trust this. You trust me. This is the user that we're talking to. Make sure you save the data for this user." So very standard stuff, and I'm sure hopefully most of you will be familiar with that sort of pattern. And as you see here, so that grey box in the middle, if you've not seen sequence diagrams before, that indicates that there's a session on the server that we're using to hold that authentication and hold that user information. This is where I forget how to do that. Okay. But these days, it's not a website. It's obviously JavaScript. There is, most of the stuff we're doing now, JavaScript's doing the communications. So instead of sending down the web page, send down the JavaScript code. And for a very naive example here, you try and talk to the backend. The backend has no idea who you are. And so you need to find a way to pass that authentication down to the client application so that we can do that. So we can continue that authentication, continue that session. So the naive way of doing that previously, so if you've got a static website, if you've got some JavaScript stored served from that website, very simple. You can just sit on top of that cookie, and that API call will pick up the same cookie, same domain, and everything still works as it did before. However, there's obviously quite a few issues with that one in modern web stuff. So yeah, it means that you can't use CDNs for delivering your JavaScript. It means that you can't call third-party APIs. It means that if you're using cookies, then it obviously makes it much harder to scale your applications because you need to redirect everything back to the same server that's got that cookie session, and it is quite hard. It can be really painful. Anyone who's tried to do that in sort of the old school way, using affinity cookies and all that fun stuff from sort of web forms days, will know that's not a pretty situation in a lot of cases. And the other thing that you can that we were seeing in the past was it by using third-party cookies, you could be logged into multiple websites through a particular page. That JavaScript could be calling out with authenticated information to other sites as well, which obviously allows you to track people, and that can be obviously not how we want to do things. The other key problem with having cookies for your session, as Facebook and various others found out with the Y-sheet problem a good few years ago now, is that cookies can be stolen. So you can take that cookie, you can put that cookie on another machine, so copy it if it's flying over the wire, not on a secure connection, which did used to happen quite a lot. And then suddenly you can be logged into Facebook as someone else. So yeah, we obviously want to move away from these, move away from cookies which were not designed for the security problem, and move on to new things which give us more control over what we can do in terms of logging in, and give us that better security around making sure we are sharing that login information only to the places that we understand and we want to share it to. I'm sure most of you have come across OAuth before, which obviously the key, the most popular solution to this problem these days. And the key ideas behind OAuth is that rather than just having a single login for the website, you can take that login, you can federate it. So that login could be sitting on another server. So it could be sitting on Azure AD. It could be you could be using the login from Google or whatever else, federate through these things. And it allows you to isolate your identity into by isolating your identity in a separate service. It allows you to add additional features. So adding things like two-factor authentication, adding things like your hardware keys, adding things like some stuff you can get with AD these days, where you're doing identification using geolocation and tracking patterns to make sure that people aren't logging in unexpected ways. So you're suddenly logging in from Russia or China or whatever else. These sort of detecting these sort of things, which is all obviously much easier if you've got a dedicated service for managing your identity. I'm not going to go too much on that one. I know Chris will be talking a bit more about identity services as a whole. But yes, OAuth allows you to separate that out. It allows you to have finer grained control over the delegating your access. So you can give an API just access to your calendar and not your email. You can give it access just to read your calendar and not write to it. So you get that much finer grained control, and you can revoke access to certain things as well. So you can say, I don't trust Evernote anymore. Let's stop them from being able to view my calendar. That sort of thing. And the key way that OAuth works, OAuth has worked for web up to now, has been that mostly your application will get a unique ID and a secret. You will then store that somewhere safely. If it's on a web server, great. Store it on the web server. It's all nice and secure. So let's you use that for communication. And each application has a set of scopes which says you're allowed to view calendars, but you're not allowed to view emails, that sort of thing. And that's all managed by the identity provider. So the basic OAuth flow here, that a lot of applications that I have seen have used some variation on this, is that let's just see if this will work. So yeah, you log into the website, and then you want to go off and use that login somewhere else. So the site here will then send you the password for that application. So send that client ID and that secret down to the client. I have seen this on an awful lot of places. And also and then you use that to call the APIs and get all the information you need. Obviously, sharing secrets is a very, very bad idea, because as soon as those secrets are out on the client, it's then possible for anyone else to impersonate your application, get whatever access that application has, if they can get your credentials, they can use that application information to impersonate you as if you were using that app. So I'm just getting used to this stuff. Yeah, so the key problem is that we've got these secrets, these client secrets, which are no longer secret. So if you want to do that login, that standard OAuth login using that approach, you could put that secret in the JavaScript, which puts it onto everyone's machine, and all it takes is one person to crack it, and they can redistribute that. You can keep the shared secret on the server, which is fine for certain circumstances. That's certainly how your timer-based services would work. So your timer-based services, there's no user interaction with that stuff. They can have their own logins because you can keep them secure. That's all within your network. But if you're stopping that onto an API, then you need to be very careful that you know who is calling that API. And I have seen, again, a lot of bad implementations where you're using back to the cookie problem before. You're using a cookie which could be intercepted, or using some other mechanism for connecting that user to a session, which is prone to all the problems that we had before we had our auth. So you're putting that in that extra infrastructure, but you're not using it to address you're not using it to its potential, and you're reintroducing the old security problems in other ways. And of course, a lot of this stuff cannot work with federated or third-party domain, because using those connections does mean that that secret only gets shared far more widely. So what OAuth has is a solution called PKCE. So we've got this new approach. Well, it's new to web developers. It's something that mobile developers amongst you will possibly be familiar with. There's been a lot of app support for mobile for a few years now. But with release last year in August, the Microsoft and that have now brought this into availability for this onto AD for your JavaScript SPA apps. You can also get it from Auth0. I'm pretty sure Okta has an implementation as well. So it's getting more widely used. And basically, the way PKCE works, the slide will change. And so the other key problem with a lot of the old ways of doing things, by using cookies for the sessions and these sort of things, you are, as soon as you've got a third-party server, so as soon as you are using ADB2C to log in, or whatever other federated service you want to use, the site has to go to that server to get the authentication information. And if you're using Safari, if you're using Chrome, and from a couple of weeks' time using Firefox, those cookies will not work. Those are third-party cookies And the only way to get that login to work is to redirect to the server. And there's a whole bunch of ways that breaks. As anyone who's tried to do this stuff on Safari in particular, the Safari on iOS has some really big security barriers for this, which means that a lot of the login approaches will not work if you're using cookies. So the key thing that we're looking at with this PKCE solution is that basically we've stopped trusting everything. As with the move to COVID, with COVID and everyone moving working from home, you do not have a trusted network. There's a whole bunch of other reasons why you're not going to trust things. So we don't trust the network. So everything's sent securely. We're not trusting the clients. We're not going to hand out shared secrets because anyone could grab that and use it. And as a client, we don't going to trust a whole bunch of other servers. The browsers don't trust third-party cookies. We're not going to trust redirects without core CSP type authorization to say we trust this site for this page. So we need a solution that will respect the fact that we no longer have a trust relationship, and that trust needs to be verified at every step. So we're not using third-party cookies. We are not using refresh tokens. So refresh token is a secret, a long-lived secret, which sits on your machine, and that is a security hole. So we don't want that. We want, instead of trusting certain systems, we're going to verify each step. So the key way this looks. So again, it's quite a complicated diagram, but key thing here is when you do your login to your when you want to log in to a new site using a PKCE enabled identity provider, what you'll actually do is on your machine you generate a pair of secrets. So they're related to each other. So you have a code challenge and a code verifier. You send the code challenge with your login request and a callback URL, which has to match something that the identity provider knows. So you can't put in just whatever random dodgy site. It has to be something that the identity provider will respect. That will send back the auth code. The identity provider will send back the auth code if it trusts you. And then you will send back the auth code and a code verifier to match the code challenge to prove that you are the person that asked for the initial login. So therefore, you've established that relationship between the request and the request to login and that callback with the request tool to get the token. If the identity provider likes all that and is able to verify all that, it'll give you your tokens back. And standard access tokens, they could be JOT tokens usually. And then what you can do is you then have the ability to verify those tokens against your identity provider using all your standard mechanisms. So checking the signatures, checking the audience, all the standard verifications to make sure that token you've got back is a valid token. And you can then use that to call the API, which will do the same verification checks to make sure that you have that authority to do what you're asking to do. Okay. So the key thing with PKC, the key secret is there are no secrets. So the secret you have is just for the duration of that login flow. You have that code verifier and code challenge, which work together to prove that login flow is has not been compromised. And once you get that, you get a short-lived access token. So same as you would do with your standard OAuth, you get that standard access token that you just put in the bearer header and in your future calls, in your future API calls. And then when that expires, you have to go back to the identity provider and do another login route. But as I'll come to in a minute, there is a silent login route that you can use for that rather than using a refresh token. So this is what it looks like. like, I don't know if Chris was going to talk any more about the sort of details around this, but as a developer using your in your JavaScript app, this is basically all you need. So inside the config for MSAL, so this is the library I've been using for doing this. Which I say it supported it since I think it was August last year. It went GA. So inside the MSAL config, you have a client ID, which is your sort of application ID, just your GUID. You've got your authority, which is your identity server, and that's it. There's no secrets in that at all. So there is nothing to be compromised in that configuration body. And then with that configuration, you initialize your client, and that client you can either do a silent login. So you can either do the silent login, which is for your that's the returning customer flow. So yeah, you got your shopping site. Someone comes back to your site. You do this silent login to check if they've currently got a session, if they're currently logged into the identity provider, and you can use that to grab the tokens and make sure they've got a session. If that doesn't work, or they're a new user, then you can do a redirect flow, which will then redirect the browser to the login server, allow you to do that login, and then redirect you back to your application. So yeah, to get key rules when you're using the PKC flow. So because there's no refresh tokens, there's nothing to store in local storage or any other insecure medium. So generally, you let the MSAL library itself handle as much as it can, and then you want to store whatever you get in memory. You don't want to use persistent storage because it's a short-lived secret, and you don't want to be leaking that secret out. As I showed you there, the configuration information, the application ID, callback URLs are all public. They are accessible. You can put them in the configuration. So when you're setting up your applications, make sure you use that least privilege principle so that you only have access to the scopes you want, the information you want. And just make sure you're storing access token securely, because that is what we need to do with access tokens. So yeah, quick summary, bit of a whirlwind tour of the whole thing. Happy to answer questions afterwards. But yeah, so yeah, the web ways that we were doing things before, so your sessions and your sort of back-end authentication stuff don't work for SPAs. Luckily, OAuth has had methods for allowing us to do that, log in more securely, but it's not been but that doesn't quite work for the way we're currently using SPAs, where we're getting the JavaScript to do all that authentication itself against those APIs. That Microsoft's architectures in particular. So if you have got a SPA, use PKC for your authentication. Otherwise, you'll get yourself in trouble. All the trouble getting the security picture right. And that is the quick overview summary. So yeah, any questions?
Thanks, Craig. So I just pop out from nowhere, don't I, onto the screen and give you a fright. Yeah. So we've there's a little delay on messages coming through on the chat, so we'll give it a few seconds to see if anyone's got any questions. But I've got a question in the meantime. Is there anywhere that's like your go-to place to learn? Like if you're just getting started with this, like where would you recommend that I go?
Yeah, so the best place I've found for documentation for this is Auth0. They've got a couple of really good blog posts explaining the technicalities of it all. And if you want to write your own library to do this, then they've got all the details you need. So it says, you use this JavaScript, hashing library. Here's some code to use. So yeah, Auth0 have got the best technical write-up of how it works.
Sweet. Perfect, thank you. We have got a question from Paul. I'll show it on the screen. So do you have any recommendations for storing access tokens securely within the browser during the session? It's a great question.
Yeah, so basically you want to store it in memory if you can. That's really the key thing. So not using local storage, not using any other sort of persistent medium. If you keep it in memory, the browsers are usually quite good at removing that stuff. Unfortunately, there's no sort of secure area that you have on mobile apps. So yeah, keep it in memory. Let the memory get cleared out as soon as possible. And browsers are quite good at isolating the processes these days, especially after the Intel chips went a bit haywire, throwing secrets everywhere. So yeah, the browsers are quite good at keeping the processes isolated. So keeping it in memory is your best bet.
Sweet. And I've got an answer from Christos, and like magic, I can add him into the chat and he can give us the answer. Hi, Christos. So you mentioned you've got an answer here. So if you're using the Microsoft Identity, then it's all built into the library.
That is correct. For MSAL, you don't have to worry about caching. In most cases, we will provide you with a built-in cache, so you don't have to worry about how you do it. In fact, I will show you a demo, although the demo I will show will not have a token cache involved. However, you can also offload things to distributed caching as well, like say Cosmos or storage, anything. Especially if you're writing server-side code, then you can offload to anything that can implement the iDistributed cache as an interface. So it works very well. And for the browser, I think what Craig said, keeping in memory, it's probably the safest bet. You don't want your cache, your browser cache, to be littered with access tokens.
Yeah, definitely. We've got another question here from Thingme. Not sure that's their first name, but anyway. So do you think we should be using passwordless solutions? And if so, is it something we can do in Auth0?
Yeah, I can't talk to Auth0 itself. I believe it does. It does allow it. But yeah, certainly, passwordless is a very good reason to be using a separate identity server. Like the OAuth flow is absolutely perfect for this sort of thing, because that doesn't require any passwords itself. It's just a matter of identifying with the identity server, and you could be using hardware tokens. You could be using your phone token, those sort of things for your passwordless. Certainly ADB2C supports those things. I'm sure Christos will give us any more information if you want that. But certainly, moving towards passwordless is a good idea, because users aren't very good at passwords.
Yeah, well, Christos is a wee bit biased, but Microsoft Identity supports passwordless.
Yeah,
just a little bit.
I'm fairly sure Auth0 does, but don't quote me on that.
No, totally fair. Did anyone else get any more questions? Great. Well, nothing yet. We'll maybe bring you back in later, Craig, if there are any more questions. But thank you so much for your talk. It was I learned visually, so having all those diagrams is like the perfect way for me to learn about something. That was great. Thank you.
Excellent. You're welcome.
And I'll say goodbye for now, and we'll see you later. And I've already said hello, Christos, but not even said hello, just jumped you straight into a question.
Yeah, I had to. Sorry. Compulsive disorder. Obsessive compulsive disorder. Anything that has to do with identity, I have to jump in. So thanks for having me again. It's fantastic to be here.
Back.
I miss Scotland. I miss the awesome accent. I miss the people. I miss the weather. No.
That's a lie, isn't it?
Although Seattle is not too far off from the Scottish weather. So sometimes we get the odd memory back. But I'm really excited to be talking about identity. I will approach it from a very different perspective than Craig. Craig actually jumped into the deep end with all these flows and auth diagrams and what have you. So, and I tend to avoid talking about these things because in most cases, developers don't really want to know about these things. Right? I don't want to spend 3 months learning about the auth flows and OAuth 2 and OpenID Connect. I mean, you're more than welcome to do that, but I know that most developers see identity as an item in their checklist that they have to implement and then move on to something more exciting. And I can tell you, identity is not as exciting as I make it sound, but hopefully walking out of this session today, there will be a couple of learnings that you'll take. And predominantly, there's one thing I want you to remember. Do not implement your own identity system like I did back in 2007 when I was a young and naive developer. And I was contracted to build a CMS for one of the prominent universities in Scotland. And I decided to create my own CMS. And why not create my own identity? And as memory will have it, I made a ton of mistakes. And it took me an insane amount of time to implement that. And it was a major challenge because it goes way beyond just a username and a password that you need to store somewhere securely. And even that people get wrong today. In fact, as I jump into my slides here, you'll see that, I will come back to that. You'll see quite a few well-known companies making my list over here. And this is just a fraction of what's out there. People will screw up identities.
It's one of the top 10 things that says don't do your own auth.
Don't do your own auth. I mean, we have 1,500 engineers and another 1,500 almost or 1,000 PMs working at Microsoft Identity, working hard so you don't have to work hard. And we'll try to keep you off the news, at least for the reasons that you don't want to make the news. Like
I'll make that. That's the headline. We'll keep you out the news.
Like
right,
507 sites over here made the news in the last few years.
Wow. Right. Well, I'm going to hide myself now and let you go back to the start of your slides, and over to you, Christos. Thank
you very much. So identity, what happens if you get it wrong? You make the news. 507 websites over the last 10 years that Troy Hahn has been running his Have I Been Pwned website. If you haven't used that site, I would urge you to go and sign up so you can find where your emails and accounts have been compromised, which sites. And some of the sites you may or may have not used, but there are so many out there. Casalo was probably one of the latest ones I had when I created these slides. 1.5 million accounts compromised from Casalo because they put their data in an insecure storage account. So although it's not authentication, it's still something that has to do with authorization, another element of identity and security. And if you are a Facebook user, then you do know that 500 million accounts also made the news, and they're publicly available to use and pre-use and abuse as of 2 weeks ago, just because, identity is hard. So I don't want you to feel that identity is hard. And I will show you today that identity can be simple as long as you follow some certain standards. So the first lesson, and probably the only lesson, is please do not implement your own identity for so many reasons. Beyond the screwing up the security, there are other considerations such as making sure that your database can scale, making sure that it can handle the load, it can scale with your customers. 30 billion authentications take place every day on the Azure AD system, on the Microsoft Identity platform. Azure AD is one of the components. Then you can see how we can scale insanely and handle an insane load. And I know what you're going to say. Azure AD made the news a couple of weeks ago when we brought things down. And that was down to human error. Don't get me wrong. Engineering teams will work and find what the root cause was, and we know what the root cause was, and we make these mistakes. But it's undeniable that we handle 95% of the S&P 500 companies, but we also handle startups. We also handle this single user company that they need to authenticate and sign up. The whole point there is that you don't have to worry about scaling. So as a developer, when you're thinking about identity, you don't have to worry about where your data is going to be stored and how is your data going to scale with your solution. And that's very important, right? Because all you care about is adding identity to your system and then moving on to something more exciting, like adding CSS to your buttons. And I know that can be exciting too. So I work at Microsoft, I work on identity. I try to teach developers how to do identity correctly and how to write more secure solutions. Security comes in layers. So hopefully by now I have convinced you that you don't want to make the news for the wrong reasons. You don't want to spend 3 months learning about OAuth flows and OpenID Connect. And now you're thinking, how do I get started? Or your manager comes to your desk and says, hey, we're building this new mobile app or this new web app, and we need to sign up users to our platform. It has potential. So the first question you're going to ask yourself as a developer is, do we already have something in place? If you already have Microsoft 365, Office, or if you already have an Azure subscription, then the good news is that you already have an Azure AD tenant sitting there waiting for you. That means that you already have an identity system ready to be used with all your users onboarded. The next question is, how easy is it to get started with building authentication? Depending on the platform that you use, depending on the language that you use, it can be as simple as a single line of code all the way to maybe 15 lines of code. We try to keep things very simple for you. We provide you with the appropriate libraries so you don't have to spend too much time. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that you have to strip everything out if you already have a mature solution, just so you can add the latest MSAL stuff. our Microsoft Identity libraries. You can bring your own libraries, you can bring community libraries, you can bring open source libraries, as long as they're OpenID and OAuth 2 standard compliant, then anything can be used. Then the next question is, does it integrate well with my platform? If you are running on Azure, we provide you with a fantastic ecosystem where identity takes care of a lot of things beyond just the authentication and authorization. And we try to make it available in as many languages and as many tools as you can use. So right now, it is built into Visual Studio and .NET CLI, but we're also working with the Java teams and IntelliJ and JetBrains and Rider to make identity available. So if you're using Rider, there's already an Azure Toolkit extension for Azure Active Directory, which means that you can create and add identity to your .NET apps directly from the ID. We're still working on the IntelliJ implementation, but as you can see, we want to make it available to you and reduce the context switching. So no matter the language, no matter the framework, we want to support you. And no matter the platform that you're running as well. That is very important. I have a nice controversial slide later on, which I will expand on that. And finally, and this is the most important bit for you as a developer, does it support advanced security capabilities? Remember, I said it goes beyond the username and password. Okay, you sign in your user. Perfect. Can you add multi-factor authentication without really writing any code? Can you add advanced features such as I said, continuous access evaluation or conditional access? Like you might want to restrict access to certain users at certain times. You might want to restrict access based on IP addresses. Or you might want to evaluate your tokens continuously as they come in. And that is probably one of the most exciting features that I'm really looking forward to learn over the next few months. We have some private work happening at Microsoft. The standard has not been ratified yet. So as an industry, we haven't really decided what continuous access evaluation will look like. But at least at Microsoft, we're trying to move ahead of the competition, or move ahead of the standard, not the competition, move ahead of the standard. So at least when you use our platform, you can feel confident that your access tokens won't be compromised. And if they get compromised, they can continuously be evaluated. That's a fantastic feature. But as I said, no writing code. Imagine having to implement multi-factor authentication. I did it for my CMS, as I said earlier on. You need extra services. You need an email service. You need a sending text message. And you can find all these, but you have to hook them up. You're responsible for them. You have to scale them. You have to pay for these. And it's tricky to get them all done. What if you could do it all with just one library? So the Microsoft Identity Platform will definitely improve your experience when it comes to identity. Hopefully it will do. It provides reduced sign-in friction, so you don't have to think about what the user experience would look like. And you can also customize it depending on the platform they use. It also opens the door to accessing all organizational data, especially with Azure AD. Once your user sign in, then you can use that same sign-in experience, the same MSAL library to go and grab access tokens for your Azure resources, for your data like Dynamics, CRM, SharePoint, OneDrive, and you can do all that through the Microsoft Graph, although you don't have to use Microsoft Graph for all these things. Complying with IT is also very important. Now, as a developer, you want to move fast, you want to implement things and move forward. But the IT team is responsible there for managing access to the systems, for enforcing policies and rules. So as a developer, inheriting all these capabilities directly into your applications without you having to implement them in code is very important. So if my IT admin comes and switches on the multi-factor authentication for all the users that access systems, it means that I will automatically inherit that without having to write any code. If my IT team says from now on, we want to make sure that only specific users can access this solution, then they can also do that. And it won't be surprising to hear that I worked with companies in the past where people that left the company still had access to public-facing systems because guess what? They never rotated the keys and they never removed their accounts. So one of the dangers of you managing your own databases, your user databases, means that you have to maintain and manage access to those systems. And since companies grow fast and since companies will be littered with these kind of user databases that you don't have in one central location, it becomes very tricky to remove access to all systems. So I had people that had admin permissions to systems that had left the company from, and it was very hard for people to work it out. So complying with IT and making sure that as soon as somebody leaves the company, their access is removed, or as soon as somebody accesses the company, they can get access to all the data automatically, is very important. And finally, safeguarding access. Craig talked about PKC, the latest standard. You automatically get that out of the box if you use the latest libraries. Safeguarding access to data, we make sure that any data that is stored in Azure, it's securely stored. There's no cross-contamination, cross-pollination, and you as a user also have the power. You have the power to consent to quite a few things. So, for example, every time you try to access a new application, or any time that this application requires new permissions to access additional data, you need to consent to that information. If you don't consent, we cannot access your data. So the developer has to be upfront about what data gets accessed, and the user has to consent to that data being accessed. So if you are working, for example, on an Outlook-like app, and then this Outlook app requests access to users' OneDrive, then as a user, I might say, well, I only want to look at my email. Why would this app ask access to my OneDrive? I don't want to give it access. And that means that I trust that the application can only do what I give it permission to do. So safeguarding access is very important through the consent framework. Okay, so next, hopefully by now I've convinced you that you should be using the Microsoft Identity Platform. And the next question is, how do I get started? What do I need to do to make things work? There are two main components here. One is inside Azure AD, you need to go and create an app registration. This is you showing your intent. So you go to Azure AD or the Azure AD B2C portal, you create a new application registration. This is very similar to Google and Facebook. If you ever had to work with these solutions as a developer through their API, you need to create an app or an app registration, whatever they call it on their framework, that says, I'm going to be working with this data and I need some programmatic access. So this is the exact same thing. You can create that in the portal, and we'll do one for our demo today. Or you can create one through the Microsoft Graph, so you can do it programmatically. You can do it through PowerShell or through the Azure CLI. You choose the tool. You can enterprise that and then make it part of your CI/CD, or you can use your admins. In certain cases, large organizations will only give certain admins access to create app registration. So you might be restricted on what you can do. But now that we have the app registration, let's say we're working with a web app, we need to go and implement some code. And that can happen in two different ways. One is you use the MSAL library. If you're new to the Microsoft platform, then we provide you with the Microsoft authentication libraries out there, and you can choose the one that works best for your framework and language, or you can bring your own libraries. You can bring your Passport for Node.js. You can bring your Python libraries for OpenID Connect. You don't have to use MSAL, and that's what I'm saying. Now, one important note here, at this point, there are currently two different libraries sitting out there. There's the older ADAL, the Azure AD Authentication Library, and the new MSAL. By new, I'm saying it's been out there for about 3 years, but since we had them running side by side, it can be quite tricky. So we have announced that ADAL will be discontinued, or will end support for ADAL at the end of June 2022. So you have about 1 year and 2 months to start migrating your applications. If you need support, if you need help, please feel free to reach out to me. I will provide you with my contact details at the end. You can find me on Twitter as well. We have a fantastic Discord community. Reach out to us. We'll help you migrate. We have whole dedicated teams helping customers and developers move off ADAL. So just mark that date. Your solutions will still work, but won't get any security updates. And that's an important feature. Please, 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 please work on a migration if you're still on ADAL. Now, in some cases, and in fact, in many cases, your application does not just sign in users in. It will probably need to access certain APIs or certain data. And since many companies today like to go with an API-first approach, it's not uncommon that your app will need to access an API to access some data. I don't think anyone hooks up their SQL providers directly to their apps anymore. It's not web forms days, although some people may be doing that. So what I'm saying is, if you need to access an API, you may need to go back to Azure AD for some small configuration changes, but that's all you need to do. Now, from that point onwards, you are working with the system. You're ready to work with the system. However, before we start doing some demos and what have you, there's one important decision that you need to make when you want to work with the Microsoft Identity Platform. The type of users that you need to support, or the type of identities that you need to support. There are two, at the very high level, there are two. If you are working with work and school accounts, if you are creating line of business applications, if you're creating an app for your enterprise at contoso.com or at screenmedia.com or whatever, then you need to use Azure AD. So Azure AD is designed for internal line of business apps that will allow organizational users to access the application. And on the other side, we have I am building something. I'm building my next Netflix. I'm building the next Walmart. I'm building the next Tesco. I need customers to come and sign up for an account, and they need to work. And you might not be at that scale. You might say, you know what, I'm creating a forum for my buddies to talk about World of Warcraft, or I'm creating a mobile app and I want people to come in and customize their account and create a profile so they can speak to each other. So no matter what the case is, if you need to bring external users into your app, then Azure Active Directory B2C, business to consumer, business to customer, whatever that you want it to mean, is the solution. So two options on the Microsoft Identity Platform: Azure AD for internal users, B2C for external users, and then there's a bit of a mix and match for business to business and other scenarios, but I don't want to confuse you with these. Feel free to reach out to me if you want to discuss more advanced scenarios. And the nice thing about all that is that the Microsoft Identity Platform is built. Oh, I skipped. It is built on top of open standards. And I'm not going to go into too much in depth of OAuth 2 flows or OpenID Connect capabilities, but obviously you're free to go and spend time working with these. But the fact that we're built on top of standards, the fact that there's no proprietary technology, means that you can bring any library that already works with the standards, and it will work with our endpoints as well. So let's go and do a demo, because enough of me talking. I know it can be boring sometimes. So right here, I've signed into my Azure AD portal. In fact, I'm using a Microsoft 365 developer portal. This is free for anyone. You can go and sign up. Just search for Microsoft 365 developer program. If I can type. And if you navigate to this page, you can actually sign up for a free account. It is free forever, as long as you use it once every 90 days. It gives you the ability to create an Azure AD tenant with an E5 license, so that gives you everything. It also comes with sample data, so sample users, sample emails, sample calendars, sample calendar events, sample SharePoint. And that means that anything you can do with the Microsoft Identity Platform, you can do. It doesn't come with an Azure subscription. So if you want to use that account to go and access your Azure data, then you won't be able to do that. But from an Azure AD perspective, it's a fantastic way to get off the ground. You can use Graph on this platform as well to play around. And it's free, right? So you get everything you want. And the reason why I'm saying you should be using this is because it gives you admin permissions. So you don't have to go to your admin and say, hey, go and create me an admin admin consent to my app, or give me permissions to access certain things. It's free, and it provides you with unlimited access. So here I'm going to say I'm very new to Microsoft Identity. I have no idea what I'm doing. How would I get started? So we talked about app registration. So let's go and create a new app registration, and I will name it Scottish Devs JavaScript, because I'm not imaginative enough for names. Scottish Devs JS. All right. I only want to authenticate users for my organization. So it's a single tenanted app. And I'm not going to do anything else. I'm just going to press register. So far, I only had to type something in a text box. And then I'm going to go to Quick Start, because obviously I don't know what I'm doing. And since I don't know about single page apps either, I'm going to try to use the flows here and the examples. So as you can see, we have JavaScript with auto code flow with Pixie. That's what our friend Craig was talking about. We have JavaScript implicit. So that's the older one that you want to avoid because it's less secure. And then we have the Angular and React preview libraries that allow you to hook up directly to these frameworks. We have Angular components. So we have an Angular MSAL and we have a React MSAL, which are very specific to these frameworks, which allow you to quickly add these components to your app without having to wrap them into Angular components or React components. And then Blazor WebAssembly, the client side Blazor, that you can also create a sample there if you like to do everything with .NET. But for now, I'm going to go with a pure JavaScript solution, right? The plain vanilla JavaScript. So I'll click on this and it says, okay, you are creating a single page app with JavaScript. Now you need to do some changes. The first one is I need to provide a redirect URI. Where do you want me to send you the tokens, in effect? So I will say, yeah, just go and make the changes for me. And because this is a sample app, we know we'll be running at port 3000. So let's go and make the update for us. So this will actually configure the app registration for us. And then I'm going to download the sample. And it comes with everything I need. So I'm just going to copy this into my projects. And then we will crack it open inside our VS Code. And I will give you a lab and we'll run the app as well. So we can see what happens. Yes, let it place all these files. So now, if I come here and say cdms there, so everybody should be able to see that. And I will open it in code. You just type code dot on the directory that you want to look at, and it will open code in that directory. That's a nice shortcut if you haven't tried this before. And I'm going to go quickly through the app itself. So the server, it's just a node server here, just spinning up a website and listening at port 3000. It's using Express to provide the UI framework for our app. And then the magic happens inside the app. So let me just make this bigger so everybody can see. I know, zoom, zoom, zoom. And there's probably a lot more code that we really need to for identity, but let's go through that. Index.html is the main page that will provide us with all the namespaces and the UI that we need. And down here, you'll notice that we have one reference to our Microsoft library, and then a couple of references here for the pop-ups. So with that, let's see how authentication works. We'll jump into the auth config. This is where we need to configure our tenant. Oh, this is where we need to tell our library where to go to authenticate. And there are three main things that we need to provide. One is the client ID. This client ID should match the client ID that we have in the app. So let's go and see that. That was a 4AB. So let's see that. Where is that? That 4AB is here. Okay, we have a match. Then the next one is the authority. So this is the tenant that we're going to use, the Azure AD instance that we want to use, right? So here we have the B55F, and hopefully this matches our app. Yes, it does. That's perfect. And then finally, we say, where do you want me to send you your tokens? So this redirect URI, the localhost 3000, needs to match what is being configured in our app. So if we go to our app, we can see in authentication that redirect matches. If they don't match, your authentication will break. Next, in the code, we have an auth pop-up or an auth redirect. You can choose what the experience would look like for your users. You can do a pop-up, which is the default and preferred experience, but you can also do a redirect, which means that you'll actually redirect the user somewhere else. And then once the authentication is done with the identity provider, they will come back. The whole benefit here is that my app does not know about the authentication component. All it will know about is receiving some token, an encrypted document that I can read and get the claims for the user, get the information for the user, for the ID token. And if I request an access token, which we will do in a bit for graph, it will also tell me you have permissions to go and access the graph and do something with it. It's the easiest API to work with, so I don't have to spin up another API, but any API will work with an access token that you acquire. So in the auth pop-up, there are a few lines of code here, but the important bit is in here in the sign-in, you'll notice that it takes a line of code. So MSAL, which is our MSAL instance, login pop-up. So it will pop up with the information that we need. And once the authentication happens and everything's successful, it will handle the response. So that handle response, in effect, changes the UI and says, hey, welcome, Chris. And that's it. If there is an error, it will show up an error. The sign out is even less code. So here you'll see there's just a single line of code. In effect, this one will remove the cookies from the local account, and it will redirect you to Azure AD to also sign out from there if you want to. You don't have to, but you can do that. So there you go. MSAL log out. One line of code. Now down here, there's a little bit more code, and this is for actually acquiring a token. And we follow a very standard pattern for MSAL. The first time that it tries to acquire a token, it will try to do it silently. So there's no user interaction. But if it's the very first time in your app that you're trying to do that, obviously there's no token in the cache. So it will say, well, I haven't found anything. I need to interactively sign in the user, and I want them to consent. We talked about the consent framework. So as you'll notice that the next line in line 84, we'll try to say, let's create a pop-up. Let's present the user with the option to sign in. And once they sign in successfully and they consent, then we can return them back with a token response. And that token will be used later on to call the graph. So we grab the token, and then we call the graph with that access token. So all in all, probably 15 lines of code. Everything else is more about rendering the code and doing stuff, but there's not much code here for identity. So from your perspective, you haven't seen anything about Pixie. We're using Pixie. You haven't seen anything about creating token cache and what have you, because MSAL will manage that for you. And all you have to do is just copy these lines of code. These are usually in all the samples that we provide out there, and just follow the pattern. So let's run it. I mean, come on. Right here. So let's do npm npm install. And that was also part of the startup in instructions, but we skipped that. And then npm start. There you go. It's listening at port 3000. So let's see what we'll get when we get there. Localhost 3000. I'm not signed in right now, so let's go and sign in. And I'm using my test tenant. Now you'll notice that I'm already signed in, so it will not ask me to provide credentials, but it will ask me for my consent. Let me make this bigger so everybody can see that. Remember how we talked about consent? Remember about the trust between the developer and the user? There it is. So this app is actually asking me to sign in and read my profile. Yeah, I want them to read my profile. It will also ask me for offline access, so it can provide me with a refresh token. So when I need to go back and re-sign in, it will use the refresh token for me. And since I'm an admin, I can also consent to the whole organization. So I can say on behalf of the whole organization, I want everybody to just not be presented with that prompt anymore. They will automatically be consented by me. So a lot of power. Now, you can also report the app. If this app looks very suspicious, like I did not initiate this login, why is it coming here? You can actually report it to us, and we will look into that. And you'll notice that it's not published by Microsoft. And I'm not a verified publisher. So for example, if I was building an app, a SaaS app like OneDrive, like Dropbox or Box or Salesforce, I could also submit for a verification. So when people use my app, it says this app has been verified by Microsoft, and we're confident that whoever that person says they are, or the company say they are truly Salesforce. So you're not installing some rogue stuff. So your admin will take care of that. You as a developer don't have to worry about it. So let's accept it. Perfect. Now I have my welcome. So remember how we said that the UI will respond to that. I can see my profile. So here I can see what the claims came in the ID token, what the claims look like. And obviously, since it's a test account, nothing here other than my email is right. But now I also want to grab some emails. So check this out. We got incremental consent. I haven't consented to the app reading my emails yet. And now the framework can also handle the fact that part of the app needs to access some other information on my tenant. Then I need to give them a consent. In this instance, it's asking for my emails. Remember how I need to provide consent? There you have it. So here I'll say read my profile and then read my email. And it will also see what kind of permissions it needs here. Not just read my email, but also what it can do. It can be read-write email, or it can send emails on my behalf. Do I want to do that? Let's see, accept. And now you'll find all my secrets. These are all the test data that come from my test tenant. It's fantastic. Right, there you go. Very few lines of code, and you can get access to everything you need. And if you didn't have to do the graph query, it would even be less amount of code. 15 lines of code to do everything. And this will also come with two-factor authentication. I was already signed in, so I didn't have to, I wasn't prompted for two-factor authentication. But if I sign out and sign back in fact, why talk about it when I can show you? So I will sign out totally from that account, and then I will re-log in. It says you're not signed in. So let's connect here. I need to find my password. I hope everyone is using password managers these days. Please use, if you don't use one. Let me find my pop-up somewhere here. There you go. Sign in. Ta-da! I didn't have to code that. I just get prompted for my 2FA, and it has arrived on my phone, as you can see up here. It truly is two-factor authentication. And then, yes, I want to stay signed in. Done and done. See? Perfect. I love it. How could I not love that? Right, let's go back to slides. Any questions so far? I don't see any questions, but let's keep it going. What's next? Next. What do we have next? We have demos. Oh, yeah. My favorite slide or slides. Come as you are. We love any developer, every developer, and any services or platforms. In fact, this next slide could not be more controversial for a Microsoft person, since it has nothing to do with Microsoft other than the identity at the very top. So we work with all these partners, and we're actively working with these partners, not just supporting them. As I said, we're working with IntelliJ right now in building an Azure AD extension. We're going to be doing the same for PyCharm. JetBrains Rider already has it. Now, if you're working with Bitbucket, if you're working with AWS, Google Cloud, or DigitalOcean, we will support you. A few weeks ago, we did a stream with a friend of ours who was actually running everything on DigitalOcean, and they were using Azure Identity to authenticate their Node.js app, which was brilliant. And we try to support as many languages as possible. In fact, we have a Go MSAL in the making. Node.js just announced a full GA MSAL. And we don't really care where you're running your stuff, whether it's serverless, full metal, Kubernetes. We will support you, and in some cases we will also provide you with extensions for, say, Kubernetes if you're running on Azure. Again, we don't really care where you're running, but if you are running on the Microsoft platform, then you get so many benefits by doing that. Secretless apps, end-to-end. You don't have to provide secrets anymore to access your storage or your Cosmos DB. Microsoft Identity will handle the authentication across all stages, from the developer environment all the way to production. If you're using Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code, you already have an account, sign in with them. And that means that account can also be used to automatically sign you into services via the Microsoft Identity platform. So in my code, I can actually call, and you know what? I have a sample here, which I was working last week. Let me show you what that looks like. And since MSAL.js was just announced, MSAL for Node was announced last week, I wanted to put a sample together. So up here, I'm running locally on my machine, and I'm also calling into Cosmos and into storage. And you'll notice that I'm using, for my credentials, I'm using a number of credentials. I don't have any hard-coded secrets or passwords here. I'm just saying, if I'm running on my local machine, try the Azure CLI. If you can't find anything in the Azure CLI, try my Visual Studio credential. And then if you can't find anything, then look at Managed Identity's credential, which means that I can chain link these accounts, and it will try sequentially to find the one that signed in. So on my local account, I don't have a Managed Identity or my local machine, but I do have Azure CLI and Visual Studio. So it will use those accounts. And then in production, the exact same code without any code changes will run using a Managed Identity on Azure. And guess what? You don't have to be on Azure anymore. With Azure Arc, you can take any device on any platform, AWS, Google Cloud, on-prem, and join them via Azure Arc into Azure. And even though those machines are running somewhere else, they do get a Managed Identity out of the box. So my local machine here could be an Azure Arc attached device, and that would automatically give it a Managed Identity. So I could even eliminate these two. So from a code perspective, I don't have to know secrets. As a developer, I don't need to feel responsible about managing those secrets. As an IT pro, I feel confident that my team can access things securely without knowing any secrets. And if I need to have any secrets, I can store them into Key Vault, and then I can access Key Vault via Man's Identity. And now very quickly down here, I'm calling into, say, Graph, or I'm calling into my Cosmos, or I'm calling into my storage. And as you can see, I can also verify that the incoming request has a token and has the right scopes for my request. So if they have not been provided with an access, then this is what happens. So technically what you see here is 2 lines of code. Oh, sorry, not 2 lines of code. I was lying. Okay, let's see. Let's see how much it takes. So here I'm creating a container. I'm passing, I already instantiated my container client. So here I'm just saying, find me all the blobs and list them. And down here, I'm doing the same for the container client. Again, 1 line to instantiate and 1 line to call for my data. And then for verify, let's see, where was I? Verify that I have the right, or confirm, where is it? So here, it takes 3 lines of code to verify that I have the right scopes in my access token. So I wasn't intending to do this demo, but you can see how things are working so well if you're on the Microsoft Identity platform. I'm going to skip that. That's a bit fluffy and to marketing, although it does talk about single sign-on, and Craig talked a little bit about single sign-on. I use my phone all the time, and I have probably 15 or 20 different apps that are specific to Microsoft. I don't have to ever sign into those. Microsoft Authenticator will take care of the single sign-on. My company can wipe and remotely manage my devices. So again, I don't have to worry about certain things. And the fact that I don't have to remember passwords, like in fact, I don't even know my password for Microsoft. And it is an 84 something character password, which I manage on my key. But we talked about secretless before. I don't use passwords. Either YubiKeys or Windows Hello will do that for me. And on my phone, I use the Authenticator app with my face. So passwords are very rarely used these days. And it's a great experience. Your users don't have to remember and store passwords insecurely. You as an IT pro are more confident, and developers don't have to worry about implementing that in code. So we talked about MSAL. I'm going to skip through that. You get all these benefits for free. I did talk about conditional access and continuous access evaluation. So CAE, or continuous access evaluation, is one of the most amazing features that is coming to the identity world. In effect, when you get an access token, if your account is revoked while your access token is still valid, then there's no way for me to restrict access. You already have your access token, you're already authenticated, and you got authorized for that access token. So until that token expires, right now, I can't do anything. You can still access Graph or other APIs that we've given you access to. However, let's say I grab my access token and then 5 minutes later I get fired. That's good. Then there is a way with continuous access evaluation to continuously check the token against certain rules. And that means that if my token is still valid, but I'm not part of that company anymore, my token will be invalidated automatically as part of that continuous access evaluation, which means that now I don't have to have very short-lived access tokens. I can have an access token that lasts for 25 days, but my IT team can use continuous access evaluation to safeguard against restricted access. And that is brilliant because you don't have to code about that. The MSAL library will automatically pick it up and work with it, although there might be some code changes and an extension to add so you can benefit from the continuous access evaluation as it is now. These things will come. If you're interested, make sure you follow me. Make sure you follow the 45 Show on Twitch, because we'll be bringing some of the PMs to talk about this work. Next, B2C. I mentioned B2C before, providing a very immersive, very customized experience to your consumers. Your front-facing apps need to look and feel like they're part of the app, the authentication process, rather than having a janky UX where you jump into another page, the user authenticates, and they come back. They will still jump to that page, but that page will look and feel very similar to the rest of the app. So it doesn't feel very alien, or the fact that I'm leaving the main app to go somewhere else and come back. You as a developer only have to worry about providing the UX experience there, and then everything else will be taken care of by the identity provider system, i.e. B2C. And that's why I love B2C. And with B2C, you start with a very basic username and password, which is what most companies want. but customers don't want to create usernames and passwords for every single website, and they might choose to sign in with their social media accounts. So B2C supports any OpenID Connect provider. We provide you with a list of 15 out of the box, but anything that implements OpenID Connect, let's say tweets, you can use tweets accounts to sign into your Azure AD B2C or any other custom provider. So it's a fantastic way of building consumer apps. And then you can build very elaborate solutions behind the scenes. So you can have a web app that calls into an API or calls into, or a mobile app that calls into multiple APIs, and allows you to secure everything end to end with B2C. So that's exciting. And then you have multi-factor authentication, conditional access, same experience as in full Azure AD. Next, I want to very, very quickly touch upon .NET. So if you are a .NET developer, then the news are even better for you, because the Microsoft Identity Web Library, which was released back in September, simplifies the identity implementation even more. So if Marsha can do it, then surely Bob can do it too. Microsoft Identity Web is built on top of our existing libraries, the MSAL library. The reason why we had to do that is because up until .NET 3.1, .NET Core 3.1, if you were inside Visual Studio, you would go File, New Project, I want to add authentication, check. And then you would get your ASP.NET website with authentication, which uses Azure AD behind the scenes, which is perfect. So ASP.NET Identity would sign you in with Azure AD. But if you wanted to access anything else, like an API or other resources within Azure or Microsoft, you couldn't. You were stuck. You had to actually download MSAL, add MSAL, and then re-authenticate the user, and then give them access to those resources. And that was an awful experience. Like, you know, not many people knew that I had to use MSAL. And then once you had the MSAL, you're like, well, I have already authenticated my user. Why do they need to authenticate again? And that was not good. So with the Microsoft Identity Web, we merged these experiences together. So you now have only one experience to work with. The Microsoft Identity Web wraps around themselves, so it allows you to not only sign in users, but also manage your tokens out of the box. It comes with a lot of helper methods there to add custom services and custom API services and tokens out of the box, or token caches out of the box. And we'll see that in the demo very soon. If you are stuck in older framework or prior to .NET Core 3.1, you still have MSAL to work with. So that will still be there available to you. And if you're not in .NET, then MSAL is the way to go. And finally, if you don't want to use any of our libraries, if you don't want to, if you already have a mature solution, bring your own library. We will work with anything you want. So there is a little bit of a what used to be in the past and what is now. I'm not going to go through that because I think demos speak better than this. However, this slide is important because it shows you that Microsoft Identity.web wraps around all these individual NuGet packages and libraries and APIs, which means that if you still want to double with and play around with your JWT tokens or JW tokens, you can't say JW tokens, like PIN number. Your JW tokens, you can use the JWT libraries to do that. Or if you want to change the UI look and feel, you can also go and do that as well. You don't have to use Microsoft Identity.web, although in my experience, 95% of developers just want to drop that library and move on with their lives. Old hat, new hat, I do have a demo where it shows how much code you can strip out if you are moving to modern authentication. In fact, we have a couple of blogs on the 45 blog site, and I've done one for APIs and one for ASP.NET. Sorry, one for ASP.NET APIs and one for ASP.NET web apps. So you can see how much code I could remove with a new library, which is impressive, just cutting all this code. And let's do a demo. I don't want to talk about graph right now because .NET Core rocks. So here, let's stop this one. Yes. And let's do bin directory. Let's make a new directory. We'll call it. Not big enough. Should be big enough. Let me make it bigger. So we'll say cd .NET new web app dash auth. We'll say single org. So we're going to use Azure AD for this one, but you can use B2C if you want to. And the command line, what I'm doing here is I'm actually spinning up a new web app with .NET that will authenticate against Azure AD. And it will be named Scottish Devs. It's building it. So let's go and see what we have. CD Scottish, and then code. No, I didn't want to maximize this. I wanted to maximize this. Okay, let's see what we have. We have a couple of libraries, Microsoft Identity.web and web.ui. These are the important ones. In our startup, we have 2 lines of code that actually, yes, let's do that, that add authentication for us. This is all you need, in effect. A default authorization policy, which is default anyway. It's not new to Microsoft Identity.web. And then Microsoft Identity.ui, which is the UI built into the DLL to provide you with a sign-in and a sign-out endpoint. How awesome is that? So 2 lines of code. I know I promised a single line of code, so let's see if we can do better than that. Can it be done in 1 line of code? Why not? Services.add Microsoft Web App Authentication, and I'm just going to pass the configuration, the default configuration, and there you go. So that is a single line of code to add authentication. Now, I talked about the other benefits that you get. We'll see them once we run this app. But for now, we have this, and we have some app settings that we need to go and create. So here, you'll see that we don't have anything. Like, it's placeholders. It won't work. So let's go and set it up for us. Let's see how quickly we can do that. Let's go back into our app registrations. Let's create a new one. Register, and then I'm going to go to authentication, and I'm going to add a platform. And because we know it's a .NET server side or server code, we'll say the redirect URL is HTTPS localhost because we're running locally, hosts, port 5001, and then it's sign in OIDC. You might say, well, Chris, where did you come up with this funky redirect URL? It's down here, sign in OIDC. That's the expected endpoint for me to receive my tokens. So with that, I think that's all we need. So let's configure that one. Let's add this. And now just need to copy some information. My client ID, which should be down here. Let's add it there. My tenant ID, which will say which tenant we're going to use for signing in, my Azure ID tenant. Since it's a single tenant app, and down here I need to provide my domain for my Azure AD. So cmatskas goes on vein.onmicrosoft.com, and I mistyped Microsoft. cmatskas.onmicrosoft.com. In case you're wondering where you get that information, if we jump back here and we go at the root of our directory, in the overview, there's that information over here. It's also available up here. So plenty of places to find that information. Let's go and save that and run it and see what happens. Dun, dun, dun. Will it run? Let's see. So .NET build. You don't need to run .NET build, to be honest. You can just do .NET run, and we'll do it for you, both at the same time. .NET run. It's running local port 5001. So let's click on that. Oh, it's already loaded. Check it out. It already prompted me to accept my or consent to the permissions of the app, which we will do. It's the first time we're using the app. I will not be presented with that unless something changes in the app later on. And since it supports incremental consent, it will be awesome. And there you have it. 1 line of code to add authentication to your apps. That is amazing. If you like this, then let us know. We should try to implement and bring that to other libraries as well. Although 10 lines of code is not too bad for JavaScript or Java, right? So there you have it. And finally, I was going to talk about Graph. So if you haven't used Graph before, it's the one API to rule them all. It gives you access to all your organizational data, plus allows you to automate quite a few things around Azure AD and other resources like OneDrive, SharePoint, anything that is actually running on the Microsoft platform. So ak.ms, and then you can do G, Graph Explorer. This allows you to come and play without an account, although it's signed me in because I'm already signed in. So talked about single sign-on. So let's do here. This gives me access to all the information. You can build some fantastic stuff. Now, it's hard to explain Graph because, as I said, it's an API. But every time you try to type something on Outlook, you get prompted for some names, right? It says, hey, you should, on the to line, it will say, these are the people you should send an email to. This actually calls into people, and it chooses the 10 most collaborative people that you work with. So in my Outlook, it always comes up with JP because he's the person that send most of the emails, and then the rest part of the team, and then everybody else. It is a great experience to build immersive apps for your users. Like if you want to interact with OneDrive, I don't know if you ever used the OneDrive SDK. It was awful. Like I built a mobile app around the OneDrive SDK. It was an awful experience. Now with Graph, it takes a very few lines of code to build it. Let's run the query. Automatically gives me some information here. There's a beta endpoint. Beta, like the Americans. Or beta, if you're European. I can do both. And then the beta endpoint gives you a lot more information. So this is the evergreen, everlasting beta. It will never come out of beta because this is where we test new features. And then every time we find something that the customers want or something gets tested enough, it makes it into the V1 endpoint. So that's the difference. And you can find a lot of information here about how to play around. Remember how we talked about the app registrations? There you go. You can find all the app registrations here. Let's see. How true. This one will give me all the app registrations in my tenant. I can also configure them and programmatically do them from here. Scott Hanselman did a fantastic demo at Build last year where he showed how he could change the lighting in his room based on his team's presence. So if he was busy on a call, it will turn red. If he was available, it will turn green. And then his kids would know that they can walk into the room based on the light. You can build some fantastic things. I built a OneDrive notification hook for a customer where somebody uploads data to their OneDrive. The notification hook fires an Azure function. The Azure function grabs the data and pulls it into storage, and then they use machine learning to implement all that. It took probably 20 lines of code to implement all that based on webhooks, notifications from Graph, and the code to copy across to storage, and you can do it with Logic Apps as well if you want to. So there you have it. Graph Explorer, it's brilliant. So to close my session, which I think it overran, I apologize for that. If you like what you see, if you're interested in more identity scenarios, if you want to connect with us, we have a 4 to 5 show on Twitch, the 4 to 5 show on Twitch, which is also available on YouTube. Every Tuesday and wow, man, I haven't updated the slide here. Every Tuesday and Friday at 8 a.m. Pacific or 4 p.m. UK time, we go live for a few hours. We talk about end-to-end scenarios. We talk about the latest features. We tackle difficult questions, and then we take things from the community. We have a fantastic Discord channel to discuss things. So if you have questions around identity, what we discussed today, or you want to learn more, make sure to follow us on Discord. I will put a link on the chat. It is ak.ms 425 show Discord. Or follow me on Twitter. You can abuse me or reach out to me there and talk about identity. Now, I think there are a few questions. Does MSAL have any built-in support for building multi-tenant SaaS solutions? Absolutely. I covered very basic scenarios today, but we have an insane amount of customers building SaaS solutions with Azure AD. If you go back to Azure AD, if I were to go back to my Azure AD tenant, I can show you the option on how to build SaaS apps, and it will be just here in app registrations. I remember if you can change the authentication. Yeah. So if I flick the switch here and say multi-tenant apps, it means that my app can automatically be accessed by anyone with an Azure AD tenant as long as they install that app. So an admin needs to install it, but other than that, I don't have to change anything in my code. It will work out of the box.
Maybe had another there.
Yep. Does the B2C solution provide a GUI console to manage users, or is this something we need to build and call into the graph to manage? No, it actually provides you with users. So let's jump into that. So here I'm actually signing into my B2C tenant. As you can see, Azure AD B2C up there. And this is where I have my users. Now with B2C, users can actually sign up themselves. There's the self-sign up page, but you can also, oh, wow, forbid. Oh, you know what? It's because I'm not signing with the right user. I need to sign in with my proper account. So I was like, why is forbidden?
Too much dev.
I am locked. I mean, I have too many tenants. So can you have too many tenants? That's the question.
When they're free.
And they're free. That's the problem. So here you can manage your users. Obviously, you can also do bulk uploads if you want. So you can bulk update, upload, or whatever. There are a lot of random people accessing my tenant. But you can self-sign in or self-sign up. You can also have an admin to go through the process of consenting for those users to be onboarded to your B2C tenant. But B2C provides you with a UI here. And in fact, we are working on an authorization role-based experience for B2C as an extension. So the JP is working to release that as an official tool, which will allow you to actually add roles and role-based permissions into your B2C, which is not supported currently. The whole point there is that you bring role-based authorization to your apps, and it provides you with a more fine-tuned experience for permissions. So I hope this answers the question, Jonathan.
Well, thanks for all of that. That was absolutely amazing. I have to say, I absolutely love that everything's built around open standards like OIDC.
Mm-hmm.
That just so you can basically bring whatever technology or service you have, whether or not it's supported or not.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing you were showing earlier that I had a question just because for myself more than anything.
Sure.
You were saying that obviously the latest libraries have moved to the kind of newer authentication flow, the Prefix code exchange.
That is correct.
You kind of always do on behalf of the kind of developers that if something changes just under the hood, you'll swap in the new best practice.
Yes. So as long as you have the latest libraries, then new features will be available to you for free. So when we added PKC support, the MSAL JS library picked it up, so you didn't have to change your code to benefit from the PKC flow, right? It just meant that you automatically inherit that. Ideally, you want to keep your libraries up to date anyway. As part of your CI/CD, we talked about. Hope people are following that practice. Keeping your packages up to date. It is a security implementation, and therefore, you need to upgrade to MSAL v2.0. That is correct. So there was an MSAL v1 and an MSAL v2. For most of the libraries, there was a v2 update. That is correct. But ideally, you keep your libraries up to date, and we do our best to provide you with backwards compatibility, which means that you don't have to change your code when that happens.
That's a headache that no one really wants, or to have to navigate in between the rest of a sprint backlog. So that's cool. Anyway, I'm now going to just bring everyone back as we kind of round up the evening. Hi, and Carol again. Thanks, Craig and Christos for being with us. I think Christos has traveled the furthest, but you don't really get a prize because it's YouTube.
Yeah, it's been really great to see you both, even if virtually. Hopefully we can have a real life meetup soon.
Yeah, we need to get Christos back. Craig, you don't have to go as far because you're Glasgow, I believe, aren't you?
A little bit further from Glasgow, but yeah, not too far.
Yeah, although Christos is an honorary Scots person anyway.
Yeah,
I have my citizenship, so apparently I can be let into the country if I decide to come.
Cool. Well,
but yeah, if you have if we go back to in person and I am around the neighborhood, then I will definitely make an effort to come and see you, like I do when I go to Greece. Right, every time I go there, I'll try to set up a user group meetup just to talk to friends. So let's set it up.
welcome anytime.
Thank you.
People have any more questions after the event, where can they reach yourself, Craig, first of all?
Twitter, that way. There we go.
Craig Nicol. And Christos, you were saying obviously 425 show if they want to continue the journey and follow the developments.
That is true. Definitely on Twitch. You can also follow me on Twitter. I tend to engage quite a bit with Twitter as well. So a lot of people reach out to me there. If I can't answer on Twitter, then I will direct you to our Discord channel or email. So 425show@microsoft.com. It's also another way to reach out to me. You see so many different ways to interact. I have to follow all these channels and make sure that I don't miss anything out. But if you get stuck, if you have questions, if you are unsure about identity, please reach out to me. I don't want you to have any challenges, and I want you to fall in the pit of success when it comes to identity. There you go.
Well, thanks a lot, folks, for being here with us this evening. We'll say goodbye to yourselves now. And now, Carol just has some last bits of information about what we've got coming up.
Yeah, so thank you everyone who filled out our survey after our first virtual meetup. I've got lots of responses, and we've already kind of been reaching out to speakers based on the topics and stuff that you suggested. So that's awesome. It's still live, and we'll keep it live for another few weeks. So please do fill in the survey and let us know like what kind of meetups, what days are best, all of that, and we can try and tailor the events to what you'll want. The next virtual talks will be Wednesday, the 2nd of June. We're still confirming the speakers, so we'll not say what they are now. But we've been chatting to some awesome folks about some really interesting stuff. So we're really looking forward to the events we've got coming up later in the year. And we're always looking for speakers. So do reach out. Like if you want to speak at a future meetup or you want to suggest someone to nominate a friend, then let us know. It'd be really great to hear about some local speakers here in Scotland. And again, if there's any exciting tech news in Scotland and you'd like us to feature it, then give us a shout and we'll feature it at our next meetup. But between now and then, you can always get us at the Twitter handle that's on the screen there as well. We'll try and get back to you.
Awesome. So anything else from you, Carol?
Thanks everyone for joining us, and thanks to our awesome speakers.
Absolutely. And see everyone in June.
See you then.
See you then. Bye.